recall now that the theater was the Lindell Theater, and I remember it very well. And the fact is, one of the funny, and this is not in chronological order, but one of the funny things I remember about it is my brother and I went to the theater quite often with my mother and with Tana, but the one night we were very small, and in those days, of course, the woman brought their boys with them into the ladies' restroom, which was up on the upper level of the theater. And we got in there, and for some damn reason or other, when my mother closed the door, it locked on her, and we couldn't get out of the toilet. And here Mamie was with her two boys locked in the second-floor toilet at the Lindell Theater, and the windows were not the kind that opened up; they leaned out. So we got over. I remember her going over to the window and pulling the window up and screaming out to the people below that she was locked in the toilet, and could they get the manager and let us out. And I guess we eventually got out because we are all here, but that was one of the funny things I remember about the Lindell Theater. One thing is there's a place called Urig's Cave, and I think if you look in the history of St. Louis, this is located at Market and Jefferson at the site of the Jefferson Bank and Trust Company now. And the Jefferson Bank and Trust Company uses the lower level of the bank where the cave was located as a vault for their bank. This was quite a popular place to go to, and my mother and my dad and Tante and Uncle used to go there quite often, and it was a beer garden, and when it was hot in the summer, they would go down into the lower level into the cave, and temperature there was 60 degrees, which was very delightful in the summer, considering that in those days they had no air conditioning. They used to do is to get on the train out of St. Louis and go north up to above Alton in a place called Chautauqua, Illinois. If any of you have taken that river, the Great River Road, after you cross the Lewis and Clark Bridge and go north on this road paralleling the Mississippi River, if you look off to your right on your way up to Pierre Marquette State Park and to Grafton, you'll notice that this is an old area where there are some very large homes that were built and maintained for people that use them as a summer home during the hot weather. Here again, they had no air conditioning, and a lot of the people that had a few bucks would send their family up to Chautauqua to stay there for the hot summer months, and then the husband of the family would go up on weekends. I think this movie, Meet Me in St. Louis, if I remember, had a little something about this in the movie, and I'm not sure, but I thought it did. Another thing that they used to do in the summer was go to a farm in West Alton, Illinois. West Alton, Missouri. Now, West Alton, if you recall, this was before the days of the Alton Dam, and up there was a area which was near Portage de Sioux and Mockins, Missouri, and we had relatives there that had a farm by the name of Schrader, and there was a lake there, and on the farm property, and my mother and her family would go up there for a weekend, and they'd have to take the train. Now, you remember at that time there was no bridge across the Missouri and Mississippi River on the way up to Alton the way there is now, so that you could turn off and go over Highway 94. In those days, if you wanted to travel by horse and buggy or later on by automobile, you had to go all the way up the highway and cross the old bridge at St. Charles and catch 94 and double all the way back down to West Alton, Missouri. Before that time, why, there also was a train that ran up there, and most of the people, of course, took the train. In those days, there was never a informal type of dinner party. When they were ever invited out to a dinner, it was usually formal. My great uncle would wear a swallowtail coat and a high-standing collar and a top hat, and he always had with him his Malacca black cane with the gold knob, which I still have, and which I hope will be preserved in the family at some future date. Tanta then would wear a formal dress, and if they were invited to someone's house for dinner, what was known as a dinner party then, it was strictly formal and I'm sure very delightful and probably hot as hell in the summer because they never had any air conditioning for the clothes that they wore. I also remember my mother and my dad telling me about attending the World's Fair in 1904, that they used to go there at least once a week to see what was going on, and that was, of course, in the area that's primarily what is known now as Forest Park. In order to get there, it was quite a distance to travel, and when they went there once a week, they left very early in the morning and either took a horse and buggy and traveled out that way, or took what they called the tramway, which was a sort of a modified type of streetcar on the railroad tracks, and of course propelled by electricity by wire overhead. Another thing, they lived first off at an area in near the Grand and Natural Bridge area on a street called Harper. Harper was one block north of Natural Bridge. They moved from Harper when they went to Milwaukee, Peoria. When they came back, they moved to a street known as Barrett Street. This whole area then was known as Fair Place Subdivision, and they lived at 3501 Barrett Street, where eventually my brother and I moved, and which I will talk about later on in these recordings. But right across Grand Avenue, which was the main drag where Barrett Street run dead into, the whole area was, and the name Fairgrounds came from the fact that it was a fairgrounds and that they had horse racing there in those days. And this whole area immediately adjacent to that was considered a very fine and a wonderful neighborhood. And the reason for that being that it was all brand new at the time. I also recall my great aunt Tanta telling me that they quite often would have two types of drinks, and I remember one of them later on myself that Uncle made during our big Thanksgiving dinner, which I will recite later on as being recollections of my own, being a whiskey sour, which is similar to what I still make today. He would take just the juice of the lemon and put some sugar with it and put a couple good belts of booze in it and put a little ice with it and stir it up. But the other item that they always had, which I was never able to taste at that time, but I've seen it on the liquor store now, was a Piper Heidsieck brand of champagne.